My name is Rowena. I'm 32, and for the past decade, my life has been nothing but airports, rented cars, and hotel rooms. I'm a sales rep for a big company, and though the paychecks are steady, the travel never stops. People romanticize it. Snaps of me smiling with a suitcase at different terminals. But the truth is, when I come home, I don't feel like I've returned to anything real. My apartment has thin walls, thin floors, thin everything. I hear my neighbors fighting at midnight, their kids screaming at dawn, their TV blasting game shows in the middle of the day. Sometimes I lie there and think the walls will just collapse in from the noise. After weeks on the road, all I want is a cocoon of silence. But what I get is chaos. Someone else's chaos seeping into my bones. I've been saving, quietly, for years. Every per diem I didn't spend, every commission check I didn't blow on a new bag or trip. And now, finally, I've decided, enough. I want a home, not a mansion, not something out of a magazine, just a house with a yard where the air belongs to me. So I called Mike, an old friend who became a realtor. He picked up on the second ring. Rowena, finally! I was starting to wonder if you'd ever get tired of those paper-thin walls. I'm tired, I admitted. Find me a place that isn't pressed up against other people's lives. Size? Medium. Nothing ridiculous. Location? Far from highways. A yard big enough to breathe. Neighbors who won't make me insane. Mike chuckled. Got it. Give me a little time. While he searched, guilt tugged at me. I hadn't visited my parents in months. I always told myself it was because of travel, but deep down I knew. It was because I left their house feeling smaller. Still, I drove over one Sunday evening. The sight of Janet's minivan in the driveway didn't surprise me. My older sister has practically set up camp at our parents' place. Married, 2 kids, Tommy, 6, and Sarah, 4. She drags them there every week while Rob, her husband, scrolls his phone and pretends to be present. Inside, the living room looked like a daycare. Tommy raced a toy car across the floor, sound effects buzzing from his mouth. Sarah leaned over the coffee table, tongue poking out as she colored. Janet slumped on the couch, exhaustion painted on her face. Rob sat next to her, thumb moving lazily on his phone. From the kitchen came the smell of roast chicken and Mom's voice, orchestrating dinner. At the table, conversation flowed as it always did, around Janet. Tommy's already reading chapter books, Mom bragged, her eyes shining. Dad teased Sarah until she giggled. Janet sighed. Groceries are ridiculous these days. And the kids grow out of clothes before I can blink. Sometimes I don't know how we're supposed to manage. I ate in silence, mashed potatoes going cold on my plate, waiting for some space in the chatter. Finally, Tommy knocked over his juice, and in the flurry of napkins and scolding, there was a pause. I cleared my throat. Actually, I have some news. I'm planning to buy a house. The room froze. The sound of Sarah's crayon scratching across paper was suddenly loud. Everyone else just stared. I'd imagined smiles, maybe even congratulations. Instead, I got faces I couldn't read. Unhappiness, irritation, something darker in Janet's eyes. A house? Mom set down her fork. Rowena, you don't need a house. You're never even home. Keep renting. It's fine. Her words hit like a slap. What do you mean I don't need one? Everyone needs their own place. Janet leaned forward, voice sharp. I need a house more than you do. I have kids. They need space, real rooms. You're just one person living out of a suitcase. I blinked. Are you serious right now? I'm saying your house should be mine, Janet said flatly. I deserve it more. I looked at Dad, waiting for him to laugh at how absurd she sounded, but he nodded. Rob nodded too. Even Mom pursed her lips, thoughtful. She's right, Dad said, slipping into the voice he'd used when we were kids and in trouble. You don't have a family, no children. You can't even hold down a relationship. Janet's kids need stability. She needs that house more than you. My chest tightened. I'm buying this with my money. I've worked for years. This is my dream. Family helps family, Mom countered. Janet is struggling. You'll be fine in your apartment. Something inside me cracked. Fine? With walls that vibrate every time my neighbor sneezes? With no peace to call my own? I've earned this, and I'm not giving it to anyone. Dad's face flushed red. Selfish. The word echoed, familiar from childhood. I felt 10 years old again, blamed for wanting something that wasn't mine to have. I think you've all lost your minds, I said, pushing back from the table. Voices rose behind me as I went to grab my purse from the guest room. Through the wall, I heard Janet mutter something, low, but enough. She'll cave. She always does. I froze. Then Dad's deeper tone, not with the right pressure. When I returned to the hall, Janet's eyes followed my keychain as it swung from my hand. She smiled, quick and strange, before hiding it behind her wineglass. I walked out. Mom's voice followed me. We're not done talking. Yes, we are. Don't you dare walk out on us, Janet shouted. But I was already slamming the car door, their shouts muffled by glass. The drive back to my apartment blurred. My phone buzzed nonstop, calls, texts, but I ignored them. In my head, Dad's voice repeated, "You don't need a house." That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Janet's expression. Something I'd never seen before, part anger, part calculation. Mike called 2 weeks later. His voice was electric. "Rowena, I think I've found it. Exactly what you asked for." Saturday morning, he picked me up. I clutched my coffee like armor, nerves buzzing. We drove down a quiet street lined with oak trees that arched like guardians overhead. When he stopped in front of a white house with a red front door, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't flashy. But it was alive in a way my apartment had never been. The siding gleamed in the sunlight. The yard stretched wide with space for possibility. Birds darted between branches. No traffic noise, no neighbors' arguments seeping through plaster. Just air and stillness. Inside was even better. A living room with sunlight spilling across polished wood floors. A kitchen with granite counters. Bedrooms that felt like they belonged to a future I hadn't let myself imagine. The furniture, left behind by the sellers, was tasteful, warm, like the house had been waiting for someone to love it. Mike grinned as I wandered. So, I whispered, touching the frame of the red door. This is it. The offer went in that day. The sellers accepted. 3 weeks later, papers were signed, keys pressed into my hand. Just like that, I was a homeowner. I didn't tell my family, not a word. After the disaster at dinner, I wanted to savor this victory without their voices tearing it apart. I didn't even plan to invite them to the housewarming. Why should I? Instead, I invited people who actually cared. Colleagues from work, college friends, cousins, and aunts who never judged me for not having kids or a ring. The night of the party, the house glowed with laughter. Burgers sizzled on the grill out back. Music floated through open windows. Guests complimented everything. "This is beautiful, Rowena. You earned it. I'm so proud of you." Their words filled the rooms like sunlight. For the first time in years, I felt anchored. Around 8, in the middle of clinking glasses and easy conversation, someone knocked at the front door. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, the sight stole my breath. There stood my parents. Behind them, Janet, Rob, both dressed like they were heading to a dinner gala. Mom's smile was wide, false. "Surprise! We found you." Shock made me stupid. "How did you—" "Oh, we have our ways." She brushed past me before I could answer, Dad on her heels. Janet and Rob followed like they owned the place. I knew instantly who had betrayed my address. One of my cousins or aunts, meaning well, thinking it was harmless. But as my family swept inside, I realized nothing about this was harmless. In front of my friends and relatives, they performed. Mom clutched my arm, beaming. "Look at what Rowena accomplished. We're so proud of her." Dad shook hands, chest puffed. "We always knew she'd succeed. We raised her right." I stood frozen, fury crawling beneath my skin. These were the same people who told me I didn't deserve a house. 2 weeks ago, I was selfish, unworthy. Tonight, they were basking in reflected light. And then Janet and Rob disappeared. I found Janet upstairs in my bedroom, fingers sliding along the edges of my closet door, eyes scanning like an appraiser. "What are you doing?" I asked sharply. She didn't flinch. "Just admiring." "This is nice, Rowena. Very nice." Downstairs, Rob leaned against the kitchen counter, opening cupboards, lifting a wine glass to the light. "Quality stuff," he muttered. "Shame to keep it all to yourself." I clenched my fists. Every instinct told me to scream, to throw them out. But my house was full of guests, people who had come to celebrate, not witness a family brawl. So I swallowed it, smiled stiffly, and pretended. An hour later, they finally left. At the door, Mom turned, disappointment dripping from her voice. You should be ashamed of yourself, Rowena. Not inviting your own family, not even telling us about the house. We had to hear from others. Dad added coldly, "That's no way to treat parents." Shame didn't touch me. Relief did. As the door closed behind them, the tension bled from my chest. The party brightened again, laughter rushing back to fill the space they had drained. Later that night, alone, I sat in the quiet living room. The house hummed with the residue of joy, but their intrusion lingered. Janet's eyes, assessing. Rob's hand on my glassware. Mom's tone. Dad's scolding. I remembered Janet upstairs, brushing her hand against the key hooks by the entryway, lingering just a second too long. At the time, I dismissed it as my imagination. Now, in the hush, it nagged me like a splinter. 2 weeks passed. I tried to drown the memory with work, with gardening, with the novelty of waking in a space that was wholly mine. Yet the unease clung. My parents hadn't called again, but I couldn't forget the way Janet had smirked when I caught her in my room, as if she was mapping it out. One night, I dreamed of coming home to find the red door wide open, the house echoing with voices that weren't mine. I woke sweating, the echo still in my ears. I told myself it was just paranoia. After all, it was only family. They wouldn't, would they? But the dream didn't leave. And when I found a wine glass missing from the cupboard, a detail I almost overlooked, I felt a prickle run down my spine. The following weeks were a kind of bliss I didn't know I was capable of feeling. I woke each morning to quiet, sunlight spilling over hardwood instead of the rattle of a neighbor's blender. I had coffee on the back porch while birds argued in the trees, their chatter softer than any human noise. For the first time in years, the silence was mine. That's when I met Mrs. Henderson. It was a Saturday, the kind of spring day that makes the air smell clean. I was in the backyard, wrestling with a stubborn rosebush that refused to shape itself. Sweat stung my eyes when a voice drifted over the fence. "You'll need to cut it back harder than that. Don't be shy." Startled, I looked up. An older woman stood on the other side, gardening gloves smudged with soil. Her white hair gleamed under the sun, but her posture was strong. She leaned on the fence, with the ease of someone who belonged. "I'm Rowena," I said, brushing dirt from my hands. "Just moved in a few weeks ago." "Eleanor Henderson," she replied warmly. "But everyone here just calls me Mrs. Henderson. I've been next door for 20 years. Her smile reached her eyes. Clear, watchful eyes. I liked her immediately. We talked about roses, the neighborhood, even the weather, the kind of small things that carry weight when you're trying to build a sense of home. Before she left, she pulled off one glove and held out her phone. "Give me your number. You travel a lot, you said. I'll keep an eye on the place." I hesitated, then typed my number. The offer felt like an anchor, someone on my side. 2 months passed in a rhythm I cherished. Business trips came and went, but knowing Mrs. Henderson watched over the house eased the dread that used to knot my stomach each time I locked the red door. Until one night. I was in Phoenix, a week into a 2-week trip. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed. Mrs. Henderson. "Rowena, I'm so sorry to call this late," she said, voice tight, "but there are people in your house right now." I shot upright in bed. "What? Are you sure? I can see lights, I can hear music, laughter. They've been there for at least an hour." My heart slammed against my ribs. Logic battled panic. "Mrs. Henderson, maybe you're mistaken. Maybe it's the TV left on, or the neighbors?" There was silence. Then her voice cooled. "I know my own eyes, but if you don't believe me, I won't bother you again." She hung up. I sat in the hotel dark, phone still to my ear, pulse roaring. A dozen explanations ran through me, none that made sense. How would anyone even get inside? I told myself she'd been tired, maybe misheard a noise. But when I returned home days later, my house was pristine. No broken locks, no scattered evidence of a party. Everything exactly where I'd left it. Relief should have followed, but instead came guilt. I bought a pie and knocked on Mrs. Henderson's door the next morning. She opened it with a raised brow that softened when she saw me. "I owe you an apology," I said quickly. "I shouldn't have doubted you." Her kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon as she led me in. On the table sat her phone. I recorded it. She pressed play. Grainy footage appeared. My house, lights glowing in the windows. Shadows moved. Figures crossing rooms, stopping, talking. Music floated faint but real. My throat closed. "Oh my God." "I told you," Mrs. Henderson said gently. "I may be old, but I know what I see." The figures were indistinct, but the familiarity of their gestures chilled me. One leaned casually on the counter in a way I'd seen before. Another moved through the living room like she belonged. I rubbed my arms. I can't tell who they are. It's dark, yes, but they knew how to get in. No broken windows, no door forced. Her words dug into me. I thought of Janet upstairs during the housewarming, Rob rummaging in my cupboards, my father's eyes on the red door. Mrs. Henderson forwarded me the video. I left her house shaken, pie untouched, clutching proof that something was terribly wrong. That afternoon, I walked through every room of my house. The furniture sat unbothered, dishes stacked, my bed neatly made. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if their laughter lingered in the walls. In the living room, I noticed something small but unsettling. A coaster out of place, just slightly crooked, unlike the way I always line them. It could have been me, sure, but my stomach knew better. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. Each creak of the house felt amplified. Every shadow stretched long. The thought came unbidden. They know how to get in. They might come back. I pressed my face into the pillow, whispering to the dark, "Not again. Not this house. Not this time." The next morning, I made a decision. If someone was breaking in, I needed more than a neighbor's watchful eyes. I needed proof that couldn't be ignored, not even by my family. The next day, I called a security company. I wanted cameras everywhere. Not the bulky kind that scream paranoia, but discreet, hidden eyes. I needed proof. I needed certainty. "We can install a full system," the technician explained, clipboard balanced on his arm. "Front and back entrances, perimeter, even an indoor camera in the main living space. All connect to your phone app. Motion detection, night vision, you'll see everything in real time." "Make them invisible," I said quickly. "If someone comes in, I don't want them knowing I'm watching." He gave a knowing nod. "We've got models that blend right into the decor. Unless you're looking for them, you won't see them." By the next morning, my house was wired. I tested the app obsessively, switching between angles. The red front door framed by oaks, the backyard fence, the quiet living room. Everything looked so normal, it felt surreal. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. No shadows, no late-night parties. The app became a kind of addiction. Each check reassuring me that the house was still mine. Sometimes I wondered if Mrs. Henderson's video had been a one-time fluke. Maybe whoever had snuck in realized they'd been caught and wouldn't return. But the unease never left. Another business trip came. I told Mrs. Henderson I'd be away for 2 weeks. "I'll keep my eyes open," she promised. Her gaze lingered on me, as if she knew I was holding something back. The first few nights were uneventful. I'd check my cameras from sterile hotel rooms, see only stillness, until Thursday. It was close to midnight when my phone buzzed. Mrs. Henderson again. Her voice shook. "They're back, Rowena. I can hear music, see lights. You need to check your cameras." My heart pounded. With trembling fingers, I opened the app and froze. My living room, bright with lamplight. Figures moving. Not strangers. My family. Mom in the kitchen, pulling out my plates. Dad in my favorite chair, legs spread like he owned the place. Rob laughing by the bar, mixing drinks. And Janet? Janet walked through the hallway like a hostess, gesturing grandly as if she were giving a tour. Behind her trailed unfamiliar faces, guests she had brought in. They carried wine bottles, clutched glasses, lounged on my furniture like they'd been invited. I gripped my phone so hard my fingers went numb. Rage burned through me, hot and shaking. They hadn't just visited, they had moved in. I nearly dialed my mother right then. I wanted to scream through the speaker, "Get out of my house." But then I saw something on the feed that stopped me cold. Janet stood near the door, pulling a key from her purse. She twirled it casually, slipped it back in. A key. Not a break-in, not forced entry. They had planned this. The betrayal hollowed me. They had been in my house before, probably many times, laughing, drinking, maybe even sleeping in my bed. My sanctuary turned into their playground. Something inside me snapped. They deserved worse than a phone call. They deserved the world to see what they were. I dialed 911. "My name is Rowena," I said, voice steady in a way that surprised me. "I'm out of town on a business trip, but I'm watching my security cameras right now. People have broken into my home. They're throwing a party in my living room." The dispatcher's voice sharpened. "Are you watching this happen right now, ma'am?" "Yes, there are at least 8 people, drinking, laughing, using my house. Officers are on the way. Stay on the line. Keep monitoring your cameras. Tell me if anything changes. On the screen, Rob clinked glasses with one of the guests, wine sloshing over the rim. Mom carried out plates of food like she was queen of the kitchen. Dad's laugh boomed across the room. Janet posed near the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel like a family portrait. I watched, seething, as my childhood wounds replayed in real time. Janet taking what she wanted, my parents cheering her on, me invisible unless I resisted. Only now, the stage was my house, the dream I had bled for. Headlights cut across the screen, patrol cars pulling up. My heart jumped. 2 officers knocked hard on the red door. Inside, the music cut off instantly. Everyone froze. Rob stumbled to answer, his gestures wild, defensive. The officers stepped in, hands near their belts. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the tension. Rob's voice rose, face flushed. He jabbed a finger at the officer. The cop stepped back, said something, calm. Rob shoved. The officer grabbed him, twisted his arm, snapped cuffs on his wrists. Rob thrashed, shouting. Janet cried out, rushing forward only to be held back. My parents' faces were pale, their guests bewildered, frightened. The dispatcher's voice in my ear. One individual is becoming aggressive. Backup has been called. I whispered, good. Minutes later, more cruisers arrived. Guests were ushered outside, heads down. Janet sobbed, mascara streaking her cheeks. My father's shoulders slumped, all his bluster gone. Mom clutched her purse like it might shield her. Rob, drunk and raging, was shoved into a police car. I watched every second, every detail. When the last cruiser pulled away, my living room sat empty, lights still on, glasses half full on the table. My phone vibrated, calls from my parents, Janet. I didn't answer. For the first time in my life, I felt power hum in my veins. They wanted to treat me like a child. Tonight, they had been caught like criminals. I closed the app and stared into the dark hotel room, whispering to myself, this is only the beginning. The next morning, I flew home early. My director didn't even argue when I said there was a family emergency. He'd probably heard the ice in my voice. Walking into my house felt like walking into a crime scene. Glasses with lipstick stains still on them, wine bottles half empty, crumbs ground into the rug. My father's shoes had left faint dirt marks where he'd leaned back in my chair. It was like a blueprint of violation. I bagged the glasses, the bottles, anything I could use as evidence. Then I drove to the police station. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. The officer at the desk recognized my name immediately. They're still here. We wanted to hold them overnight until you could make a statement. When they brought my family out, the room tilted. Mom's hair was disheveled, Dad's jaw tight. Janet's eyes were red from crying, mascara smudged. Rob looked furious, bloodshot, like he wanted to lunge at me across the room. The moment they saw me, they started talking over each other. Rowena, thank God you're here. Mom rushed first, hands clasped like she was begging in church. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We're family. Dad's voice boomed, authority clinging to every word. Stop this nonsense. You gave us permission, remember? Tell them the truth. Janet's sobs cut through, sharp and desperate. My babies are asking for me, Rowena. I need to go home to them. Please. Rob just glared, lips curled, silent fury radiating like heat. I looked at the investigating officer instead. My voice was steady. I want to make this clear. I never gave them permission to be in my house. I never gave them keys. They broke in illegally, and they've done it before. Janet's cry cracked. You're lying! The officer didn't even look at her. He nodded, scribbled notes. We'll need you to sign paperwork, and we'll proceed with charges. Mom lunged a step closer, tears rolling. Rowena, listen to me. This is your family. You can't do this to us. What will people think? Her words stung with familiarity. My whole life, that had been the refrain. What will people think? Keep the peace. Sacrifice yourself for family. But the images from my security feed replayed in my mind. Janet twirling my key, Dad lounging like a king, Mom serving food to strangers as though my kitchen belonged to her. I am telling the truth, I said. Dad's face hardened, veins rising in his neck. Selfish, just like always. The word no longer had power. It bounced off me like a dull pebble. The officer slid papers toward me. We'll keep them until bail is arranged. Do you want to press for maximum penalties? I hesitated. Tommy and Sarah's faces appeared in my mind. innocent. They didn't deserve the wreckage of their parents' choices. My throat tightened. No, not maximum, but they need to face consequences. The officer nodded. Understood. They led my family back toward holding. Janet called after me, voice breaking. You're destroying us, Rowena. You're tearing us apart. I turned and met her eyes. No, Janet, you did that yourself. That night, I sat in my spotless living room after scrubbing away every trace of their presence. The silence was thick, not comforting, but heavy, pressing against me. My phone buzzed over and over, calls from Mom, Dad, Janet. I let them all go unanswered. Then the text started. Mom, Rowena, please, this isn't how families treat each other. Dad, ridiculous. Fix this before it's too late. Janet, how could you call the police on us? On me? My kids need me. You're heartless. One message after another. Blame, guilt, manipulation. I read every word, then deleted them. But in the quiet afterward, guilt slithered in. The kids. Always the kids. I hated the thought of Tommy and Sarah asking where Mommy was, why she was crying. For a moment, doubt cracked my certainty. Maybe I had gone too far. Then I remembered the key. Janet's smug twirl, the casual way she'd claimed my house during the party. That wasn't desperation. That was entitlement. Planning. The next day, the police called. They wanted to walk me through what they'd discovered. I drove down with my stomach clenched tight. Officer Martinez met me in a back room. His expression was calm, but his words cut like glass. Your sister admitted she made an impression of your key during the housewarming party. Soft plastic, then duplicates cut. They didn't break in. They had access. My skin went cold. She planned it? Appears so. And they also had knowledge of your travel schedule. We traced that to a friend of hers in your company's HR department. He was feeding them your trips. My breath left me in a rush. A whole network. Not an accident. Not a one-off lapse. A conspiracy. They used your house more than once, Martinez continued. Neighbors reported hearing gatherings before. Most assumed you were home entertaining. I gripped the edge of the chair. Images flashed. Strangers sitting at my table, Janet laughing in my room, Rob drinking my wine. My sanctuary, desecrated. What happens now? I managed. Your family faces fines, charges. Rob already lost his job due to the arrest. Janet's friends are furious. They didn't know they were trespassing, but prison time is unlikely unless you push for it. I sat in silence. My heart wanted vengeance, but my conscience whispered about two little kids, innocent eyes. Finally, I shook my head. Fines, records, but not prison. Not for the kids' sake. Martinez studied me. That's generous, considering. Generous. Or weak. I wasn't sure. That evening, another email pinged in. Janet this time. Long paragraphs dripping with venom. You've ruined my life. My marriage. My friendships. You're a monster. Family is supposed to protect family. You'll regret this. I hovered over the words, heat flooding my face. Then I dragged the email into the trash without finishing it. I stood in my living room, staring at the red door. For years, it had been my symbol of hope. Now it was a reminder of betrayal. But it was still mine, no one else's. And for the first time, I realized maybe that was enough. The full story came to me in fragments, each one worse than the last. A detective explained it with a grim patience. Janet had slipped into my entryway during the housewarming, pressing my keys into soft plastic she'd brought in her purse. She'd even joked that night about having the place to ourselves, a joke that now felt like a confession hidden in plain sight. With the impressions, she had duplicates made. She must have sat there afterward, planning, knowing that every time I left for work, my sanctuary would be hers. But she didn't stop at keys. She had an ally. A man named Kyle, someone I vaguely remembered from high school, now working in my company's HR department. He had access to travel schedules, hotel bookings, everything. Janet had leaned on him, promising favors, maybe even threatening to expose secrets he didn't want aired. He told her exactly when I'd be gone. The pieces fit together with sickening clarity. It wasn't random. It wasn't desperation. It was theft in slow motion, dressed up as family entitlement. I thought back to my childhood, Janet being praised for every little accomplishment, while I was the one told to share, to wait, to give. If there were 2 cookies, Janet got the bigger one because she's older. If there was a fight, I was told to apologize first because you're stronger. Dad's voice had always carried that finality. Rowena, be the bigger person. Now I understood. I had been trained to surrender, and Janet had been trained to take. The fallout came fast. Rob was fired after news of the arrest reached his boss. Janet's friends abandoned her, furious at being tricked into trespassing. Some of them had spent a night in jail because of her stunt. They refused to speak to her again. Mom and Dad tried to salvage things. They called, left messages in carefully controlled tones. Rowena, you've made your point. It's time to put this behind us. Family can't stay divided forever. But behind the calm was fear. Their voices shook when they thought I wasn't listening. They weren't just worried about Janet. They were worried about the shame, about neighbors whispering, about the community finding out. It was always the same refrain, appearances above all else. One night, sitting in the garden with the hum of crickets around me, I thought about Janet's motives. Was it really just greed? The more I replayed it, the clearer it became. For Janet, my independence was an insult. My house, bought alone, without children or a husband to justify it, contradicted everything she believed about how life was supposed to work. She had built her identity on need, on being the one who required help, sympathy, handouts. My success disrupted the narrative. If I could stand on my own, why couldn't she? That question must have burned. So instead of facing it, she reframed the world. To her, my house wasn't mine. It was wasted space, something that should belong to her family, to her children. And my refusal to give it up became selfishness, cruelty, betrayal. I realized Janet wasn't just jealous, she was convinced that what's mine should be hers. That realization chilled me more than the break-ins, because you can lock doors against thieves. But how do you lock yourself against someone who believes their theft is justice? The police officially closed the case with fines and warnings. Rob's assault charge kept him tangled in legal trouble. Janet, meanwhile, sent me emails that alternated between venom and pleading. One read, "You've ruined me. My friends are gone. Rob blames me. Mom cries every day. I hope you're happy sitting in that empty house alone. Do you even know what family means?" Another, "Please, Rowena, just help us with rent for a few months for the kids. They miss you. I'll do anything." Each time I hovered over the words. Each time I deleted them. It wasn't easy. The guilt was a reflex, like a muscle memory. But I kept reminding myself, the kids had other relatives. They had a mother and father who had made their own choices. I wasn't the villain here, no matter how much Janet tried to cast me as one. Still, the ghosts of old habits lingered. One evening, I stood in the kitchen, hand on the counter where Dad once sat during their party. I could almost hear his voice. Family helps family. But that phrase had always meant one thing. Rowena helps Janet. And I was done. Yet some part of me still needed answers. Why would Kyle, the HR friend, risk his job to help Janet? I reached out to a colleague quietly, asking about him. The story that came back didn't surprise me. Kyle and Janet had known each other for years. She'd been his first crush in high school. She'd strung him along, keeping him close, making him feel useful. He'd never quite let go. So when she asked him to peek at schedules, he said yes, because Janet had always known how to make people bend. I stared at his photo on an old yearbook page, her handwriting scribbled across it. K, always so sweet. I imagined him still carrying that scrap of affection like currency. And I realized Janet's manipulations weren't just a family thing. They were her entire survival strategy. The knowledge didn't make me feel safer. It made me feel hunted. If Janet could rope someone into betraying me at work, what else was she capable of? That night, I changed my locks again, upgraded the alarm system, added cameras inside every hallway. When Mrs. Henderson asked how I was holding up, I confessed, "I feel like I'm living in a fortress." She studied me with those steady eyes. "Sometimes a fortress isn't about walls, dear. It's about boundaries. You've built those now. Don't let them tear them down again." Her words sank deep. But the hardest part wasn't shutting Janet out. It was shutting out the part of me that still wanted to fix everything, to protect the kids, to appease my parents, to keep the peace. Late at night, I'd catch myself scrolling through old family photos. Janet holding me as a baby, Dad lifting us both onto his shoulders, Mom smiling at a birthday cake, proof that once, maybe, there had been love. But then I remembered the grainy video of my living room, filled with laughter that wasn't mine. My father in my chair, Janet with my key, my mother serving drinks to strangers. That was the truth now, and no photo could rewrite it. The cracks in our family weren't new. They had been there all along, hairline fractures hidden under years of expectation and silence. All Janet did was force them wide open. And though it broke me, I finally saw what lay beneath. Not love, not loyalty, but control. The days blurred after the case closed. My phone kept lighting up with unknown numbers, voicemails from Janet, emails from my parents, but I let them collect like dust. I couldn't bear to hear their voices anymore. Instead, I found myself drawn to the yard. The garden became my ritual. I dug my hands into the soil, turned it, planted flowers. Every weed I pulled felt like a knot untangling. Every seed I pressed into the earth was a promise to myself. I will grow things here. I will root myself where they cannot touch me. Mrs. Henderson became my companion. She'd wander over with her gardening gloves and a thermos of tea. Sometimes she helped me trim roses. Sometimes she just sat and talked. One evening, she told me something that landed heavier than I expected. "I had a daughter once," she said quietly, looking out at the setting sun. "We don't speak anymore. She chose a path I couldn't follow. Sometimes I still ache for her. But peace is worth more than proximity." Her eyes glistened, and I felt the truth of it pierce me. She wasn't telling me to cut my family off. She was telling me it was possible to live without them and still breathe. The next morning, I woke to another flood of messages. Janet again, this time longer, harsher. "You've ruined everything. Rob can't find work. The kids ask why we don't see you. You're heartless, selfish, a monster. I hope your perfect house keeps you warm at night while your family freezes." I read it once, then pressed delete. I realized something then. I had been waiting for their words to change, waiting for one of them to say, "I'm sorry, we were wrong." But they never did. They couldn't. Admitting wrong would mean unraveling the entire story they'd built about themselves, that they were the givers, the victims, the ones holding us all together. And in their story, I had always been the selfish one. So I decided to stop playing a part in their script. That evening, I sat at my desk and drafted a message. Short, not cruel, but final. "I will always love you, but I can't live like this anymore. I cannot be your scapegoat or your safety net. I wish you well, but my home, my life, and my peace are not yours to take. Do not contact me again." I read it 3 times, then I hit send. A weight lifted, not all at once, but enough that I could breathe. In the weeks that followed, my house became more than just walls and furniture. It became mine in ways I hadn't understood at first. I cooked meals in silence, the kind of silence that healed. I sat in the garden with coffee, watching light spill over the red door. Sometimes, in the quiet, the old guilt crept back. I thought of Tommy and Sarah, their laughter echoing in my parents' house, their questions unanswered. I wished I could be there for them without Janet standing in the way. But children grow. One day, maybe, they'd understand the truth. Until then, I had to protect myself. One afternoon, Mrs. Henderson and I sat with tea while the breeze rustled the oaks. She studied me with that steady gaze. "You look lighter," she said. "I told them not to contact me anymore," I admitted. She nodded slowly. "That's not easy." "No, but it's necessary." She reached across the fence, squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Sometimes choosing yourself feels like betrayal, but really, it's the opposite. It's the most honest kind of love you can give, to them and to yourself, because it says, "I refuse to keep lying about who we are." Her words settled into me like roots. Still, the paranoia lingered. I couldn't forget the HR leak, the stolen keys. I tightened my defenses. New locks, stronger alarms, more cameras. Every measure a reminder that safety was something I had to fight for. Then, weeks later, the final piece clicked into place. A colleague told me Kyle, the HR accomplice, had been fired. When I asked why, they lowered their voice. Turns out he'd been slipping confidential info for years. Your case was just the one that exposed him. He had this fixation with your sister. Everyone knew it, but pretended not to. The news brought me a strange relief. The pipeline was severed. There would be no more leaks, no more betrayals from inside my own company. But the knowledge also left me hollow. Janet had burned every bridge, friends, allies, family, and still she reached for me, like a drowning person pulling someone else under. I couldn't be her raft anymore. One night, I sat in the living room, the same living room where I had once watched them invade through the glow of my phone screen. Only now it was quiet, lamps warm, the air thick with the smell of fresh lilies from the garden. I curled into the armchair Dad once claimed as his throne. My chair now, my space, my silence. I closed my eyes and listened. No shouting, no demands, just the faint ticking of the clock, the soft rustle of leaves outside. And for the first time, I didn't feel hunted. I felt whole. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever respect the boundary I set. If Janet will show up one day at the red door, key in hand, expecting forgiveness. If Mom will leave another voicemail about shame, or Dad will thunder about duty. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I know now what I didn't before. I am allowed to say no. I am allowed to walk away. And if they choose to see me as the villain in their story, so be it. I'd rather be their villain than my own prisoner. The sun dipped behind the oaks, painting the sky with streaks of pink. I stepped out into the yard, the earth cool beneath my feet. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the stillness. This was my life now, not perfect, not painless, but mine, and that was enough.